what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So we kind of got a little bit of an unexpected update regarding Elias Pettersson's pending restricted free agency. He's obviously going to be a restricted free agent this summer, has not yet signed an extension. By far the biggest restricted or unrestricted free agent on the market. I think that he's probably going to get like 12.5, 13 million. Wouldn't even shock me on an 8-year deal. So this has been a massive topic, at least in the Vancouver Canucks community, considering the Canucks are so good, yet he still has not signed long term. So this was the update. Comes to us from the Donnie and Dolly show. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correct. But the Canucks are not getting any indication from Pettersson that he wants to be here long term. There's frustration there. I have no intel that he wants out. Up until now, I always thought EP would resign, but I'm not so sure right now. So this is a pretty prominent Vancouver-based show that specializes obviously in the Vancouver Canucks. They are plugged in to a degree. Doesn't mean that it is 1000% fact, but I would tend to believe this considering he is not signed yet. So I asked you guys on my Instagram to give me some hypothetical trades. I love my hypothetical trades. Again, I'm not saying that he's going to get traded, and he's definitely not going to get traded at this year's deadline. I've seen some people make videos being like, oh, maybe we can make a package and make it work. He's going to get traded at the end of the year. We saw with Matthew Tkachuk and Dubois that you still get an absolute haul in this summer, and for the Vancouver Canucks, they're still trying to win this season. They're not trading Pettersson, so any of these deals that I'm going to be going over is under the pretense that it's going to happen this summer when teams have more cap flexibility and after the Canucks hopefully go on a deep playoff run. So without further ado, when looking at a Pettersson trade, I think it's going to be similar to a Matthew Tkachuk trade. It's going to be a hockey trade in terms of you're going to get at least a high-level player back for Pettersson and then maybe some young players and some picks. I don't expect the Canucks with guys like JT Miller, Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes still that are still very good players, Philip Hronik, in their prime. I don't think that they're going to take like an A prospect and a first-round pick in a second for a Pettersson. They still want to be highly competitive right now, so you're going to see the deals that I chose reflected that. I got a shit ton of submissions, like 60 submissions. I've cut it down to 12, so without further ado, let's dive into it. Up first, the New York Rangers trade Mika Zibanejad, Brennan Ottman, a first-round pick and a second-round pick. And obviously, I follow a lot of Ranger fans. They want Pettersson bad. I understand considering how inefficient Mika Zibanejad has been regarding 5-on-5 play right now. He has like one 5-on-5 goal since Christmas or something ridiculous like that. So obviously, Pettersson makes sense. But I think Mika Zibanejad would be involved considering he's a center. He's a good center. He definitely needs to work on his 5-on-5 play and improve on that, but he's still a good center, so the Canucks would still remain competitive. But I think regarding this, it would probably have to be Mika Zibanejad and Gabriel Perreault, not Brennan Ottman. Not saying Brennan Ottman's not a good prospect, but if they're taking a pretty sizable downgrade in terms of their first-line center, they need an A-plus prospect, with Gabriel Perreault obviously went 23rd overall, should have gone top 15, top 10, was like my number 9 prospect. And this year in college hockey, he's leading the entire NCAAs in points this year. He's been fantastic as a freshman. So I think instead of that first and second round pick, I think a Zibanejad, Perreault, and a second, honestly, I would rather have Perreault than Ottman in the Rangers' first round pick this year. That's going to be like 27th overall, considering they're going to finish very high in the standings. I would rather have Perreault than that. So I think Perreault, a second-round pick, and Mika Zibanejad does make sense because Mika's still a top 50, top 60 player in the NHL, as well as Perreault in a year or two should be a pretty high-impact guy on an ELC, so the Canucks can stay competitive, as well as Perreault potentially developing into an elite first-liner. Next trade I have, it's the Ottawa Senators, Brady Tkachuk, and a first-round pick for Pettersson. Obviously, you met Pettersson, but thank you, Brad, for that. I think you would probably have to add something to this. Brady Tkachuk's a very good player, but he is not really on the same level of Elias Pettersson. If this pick ends up being, if we're talking this year's pick, in terms of it being 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th overall, then maybe I can see it. Obviously, if it turns out to be 1st or 2nd overall, they're probably not trading that. But if it's a top 10 pick in Brady Tkachuk, maybe that makes some sense. But again, with the Canucks, I'm not sure they want to wait on a guy 2 to 3 years. So if you did Tkachuk, that first round pick this year, as well as another solid young-ish roster guy, like maybe you give up a Matthew Joseph, maybe that could work in terms of the Canucks staying very competitive because it is a pretty big downgrade from Pettersson to a Tkachuk. But I like the overall framework, a very high pick in Brady Tkachuk. Brady Tkachuk's a good player, very good player in his own right. So that's a pretty solid deal. The Anaheim Ducks, Pettersson for Zegras, a first, and Zellweger. Olin Zellweger, obviously, former second-round pick from the Ducks, killing it killed it in the AHL this year, was like second in defenseman points per game. He's fantastic. He's a top 15 prospect for me. This would make sense if the Canucks were entering a rebuild. I think this would make a lot of sense. Zegras, young center that I still think can be a 70-ish point guy. Zellweger, I think, is going to develop into a very good first pair guy that can give you 55, 60 points. But the Canucks would take such a massive step in terms of next season and the seasons after that. They would have to wait another 2 to 3 years, the bare minimum, for Zellweger to be a high-end guy. And I assume that this first-round pick would probably be a 2025 pick because the 2024 pick is going to be like top 3. So I think if you're the Canucks, you want more immediate help. I don't think this deal makes a ton of sense. Next up, we got the Montreal Canadiens, Nick Suzuki in a first-round pick. If it's this year's first-round pick, I can see where they're coming from. Suzuki's obviously around the point per game guy this year while playing Selke level defense. He would be a downgrade from Pettersson, but that is still an elite guy that is on a pretty team-friendly contract at this point. I'm blanking on the contract's exact. I think it's something like 6 years left at 7.7, 7.8. I think it's in that range. I'll throw it up if I'm wrong. So he's on a pretty team-friendly contract. He maybe isn't a superstar number one center like Pettersson, but he has a lot of value. And if that pick from the Montreal Canadiens is this year's pick and it's 5th, 6th overall, that carries a lot of weight. I think they might have to add another young guy like an Alex Newhook that can walk in and give the Canucks 40 to 50 points next year to kind of bridge the gap in the meantime until that younger guy's ready to go. But I think that actually is a pretty solid framework for this. We got the Calgary Flames, Huberdeau, Weegar, Cole Schwindt, and a first-round pick. If you got what I'm going for on that. That was obviously what the Calgary Flames got for Matthew Tkachuk. Didn't really work out exactly. That's a pretty good joke by that guy. The Sabres, Pettersson for Tage Thompson in a first-round pick. Similarly to a Nick Suzuki, I think this makes some sense. Honestly, I could see the Sabres maybe saying no to this just because Tage Thompson is on such a fantastic deal, and that first-round pick might be 9th, 10th overall. So I actually like this for both sides. If the Canucks are not willing, if Pettersson's like, you got to give me 13.5, $14 million if you want me to stay, and they get an offer like that, Tage Thompson at $7.14 million, as well as a first-round pick between the ranges of like 8th to 13th overall, I could see the Canucks saying that, like, if you don't want to be here, see him, man. We're gonna go get Tage Thompson. He might be a worse player, but he's making almost half of what you want. Whatever. I think it's a pretty solid deal. If you're the Buffalo Sabres, it makes sense. Pettersson's obviously an upgrade, and they don't really need their prospect pool system is absolutely loaded, so they don't really need another 9th, 10th overall pick. They're gonna be perfectly fine. So I really like that deal for both sides. The Florida Panthers, him heading to the Florida Panthers for Reinhart, a first and a second. I don't think they have a first-round pick until 2026, I think, which is pretty crazy. From the Tkachuk trade, as well as from the Giroux trade, is the 2024 trade pick that they don't have this year. So they'd be dipping into their 2026 picks. And yeah, this would be crazy. This would be like the Aaron Paul. They can't keep getting away with this. You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it. If the Florida Panthers trade another guy that's like 29, 30 for a younger guy that they probably are going to sign on some cheap deal and just be absolutely loaded. But this would be pretty solid. I believe Sam Reinhart is a local. Yeah, he was born in British Columbia. I'm not exactly sure where exactly, if it was the Vancouver area, but he's a local guy. This would be a sign and trade. Reinhart would sign an 8-year, 9.5. Pettersson would sign a goddamn like 8x11 because he's going to Florida Panthers and they're just dominant signing these deals. So it'd be a sign and trade, as well as the Canucks getting a first and second round pick that maybe they can flip for immediate help. I wouldn't hate this. Maybe the Florida Panthers would have to add an Eetu Losterainen or an Anton Lundell just to give the Canucks more immediate help to bridge that. But I think that is a pretty solid and interesting deal. The Winnipeg Jets, Brad Lambert, Cole Perfetti, Logan Stanley, and Montreal's second-round pick. Similarly to the Anaheim Ducks one, if this was more of a rebuild, tear it down, trading Pettersson, I think this makes sense. But Perfetti is not remotely close to Elias Pettersson. I don't think I'm shocking anybody by saying that. As well as Brad Lambert, still, he's only 20 years old. He's killing it in the AHL, but that they're just not ready yet. And I'm not sure how Winnipeg would honestly fit it like in their salary cap situation. That'd be an absolute disaster. So in terms of if the circumstances were different, I think this is a pretty solid pick. You'd maybe have to turn that into a first round pick, but interesting from Zesty Zach. Next up, The Ottawa Senators, again, Norris and Chikrin for Pettersson and Zadorov. Zadorov's a pending free agent, so we're just not going to even include him in this. But this is a pretty interesting one. So you get Norris, who has been pretty disappointing this year, I'm not going to lie, and is locked up the next couple of years at like $8 million, like 7.9, as well as Chikrin. I think they would probably have to attach a second or a first-round pick, maybe the first-round pick that they get from Detroit this year in order to do something like that, considering the Norris deal isn't that attractive. But it is pretty interesting. Chikrin obviously would be a very solid defenseman for the Vancouver Canucks. They would have one of the best three-headed top defensemen in the entire NHL. It does make some sense. But yeah, I don't know if they're frothing at the mouth for a Josh Norris at this point. If this was last year, 2 years ago, when Josh Norris still had a ton of value, I could see something like that. But right now, I think the Vancouver Canucks probably aren't too keen for a deal like that. Next up, St. Louis Blues, Jordan Kyrou, Dalibor Dvorsky, the 10th overall pick in 2023, a first and a second round pick this year. I think if you made Dvorsky Jimmy Snuggerud, who is a year older, has a better track record, might be ready to go in the NHL next year on an ELC and contribute at a high level, I think that makes sense. They would definitely want Robert Thomas, but I understand if the Blues don't love the idea of trading Robert Thomas, considering he is on such a fantastic contract, only making $8.25 million the next 7 years. But Kyrou still is a very good player, so I think this would have to be, if you're going to do Kyrou, it would definitely have to be Jimmy Snuggerud, without a doubt. I still think that is a little bit too short. If it was Robert Thomas, Dalibor Dvorsky, and a first-round pick, I think the Canucks would happily accept that. But honestly, I'm not too sure if the St. Louis Blues would do that, considering they are entering this retool rebuild. I'm not sure that they are frothing out the mouth to get an Elias Pettersson after trading Tarasenko last year, maybe trading Ryan O'Reilly last year, maybe even trading Buchnevich this year. The team fit doesn't really make a ton of sense, but the value is okay for the most part. The Toronto Maple Leafs lose in the first round. Marner and EP swap. That's interesting. That is interesting. Marner's obviously 2 years older, still a very elite player. If the Canucks don't have a ton of leverage, if Pettersson's like, I don't want to be here, and you can go out and get a Mitch Marner. Similarly, this would have to be some type of sign and trade because Mitch Marner on July 1st is eligible for an extension. So maybe you get that done. You get the Marner 8x12 done, the Pettersson 8x13, and you swap them. I think the Leafs would definitely have to add a second round pick, maybe even a first-round pick if it's a late first-round pick, just because Pettersson obviously plays center, a much more valuable position, as well as being 2 years younger in the last 2 years, being better than Mitch Marner. But I think this could make some sense considering the Canucks would obviously be getting their best forward in terms of Mitch Marner, playing him with JT Miller. Mitch Marner could drive his own line, honestly, keep Miller and Besser together, as well as the Leafs having the best 1-2 center punch in the entire NHL, while John Tavares probably just moves to wing at that point. I think it definitely would be a very interesting deal. And then lastly, we got Clark saying Detroit for Edvinsson, Raymond, Hull, Klim Kostin, and Nate Danielson. So basically, their 2020 first-round pick, their 2021 first-round pick, their 2023 first-round pick, all top 10 picks. It's interesting. That is definitely an interesting thing. I think Lucas Raymond would be the center of any deal that Detroit would be giving up in order to get a Pettersson. They would need that young, proven NHL forward that can turn into an 80, 90, maybe even 100-point guy one day and be I don't think he's going to be as good as Pettersson, but on that same level. This might be a little bit too much from the Red Wings. I'm not going to lie. Danielson, who was, your first-round pick last year, and Edvinsson, but if they are ready to go all in, the problem is with this, Detroit would be in a pretty weird spot where they'd be all in. Their prospect pool would fall out of the top 10 with a deal like that, getting rid of Edvinsson and Danielson. They would be a high-level team, but would they be a contender next year after taking Raymond? They would be a great team next year, but I'm not. If I'm him, I'm just growing organically. DeBrincat was kind of your one trade a pick in order to sacrifice a pick in order to get a win now guy. I'm not sure I go all in to the level like that yet until we see this team maybe make back-to-back playoffs or maybe finish second in the division with 105, 110 points. Then you really pull the trigger. I'm not sure after one year making the last or second or first wild card spot, do you pull a trigger on that big of a deal, especially after trading away a first round pick last year for DeBrincat? I think you see what you have in Danielson and Edvinsson at this point, and you just roll with that. But let me know in the comments, what do you think about these deals? Do you think Pettersson's going to end up getting traded at this year's deadline? I think there's no chance. Or this summer, I could see it happening like a Matthew Tkachuk, just randomly July 27th, just the deal goes down. But yeah, want to hear from you guys. guys, what do you think about these deals? Drop your deals in the comments below, and I'll be seeing the next one.